So before I start, I just want to clarify one thing about semantics. So we're sharing about pet loss today. And when using the word pet loss, most often we'll think of death from an illness or old age or a tragic accident. But in fact, that might even be why many of you are here today. But there are many ways we can lose connection with our pets. Some animals run away and we never get to know what happened to them. Pets have been abducted by strangers or by estranged loved ones. The breakup of families can lead to loss of custody of pets that you might never see again. Or sometimes declines in our own health or financial situations can leave us unable to properly care for an animal. We're then put in the position of having to give them up to someone else, a shelter, or a rescue. There are many ways that we can lose the connection to our animal companions. And I want you to know that when I use the word loss, I'm holding all of the ways in which that connection with our pets can be broken and cause us pain. Right. So I'm sure many of us are familiar with the famous Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's 5 phases of grief. There's denial, there's bargaining, there's anger, depression, and acceptance. These 5 phases have kind of entered the vernacular and become kind of an unconscious framework for us when we think about grief. Those phases, in fact, were designed to describe what is happening for those who are actively dying themselves. They were never meant for those of us left behind. For us, there aren't really any rules. Everyone's journey through grief is unique, and it can look something like this. Barbara, do you want to put up the image that you have? All right, so if you see the image on the left, looks like it's going through steps in a particular order. It looks smooth. It looks like it has a beginning, like it has an end. But what it actually more often is the image on the right, which is all the things all at the same time, everywhere, in no particular order. All right, thank you, Barbara. There are, however, some common themes. Some of you may have experienced all of these, maybe one or two, maybe none of them. Each person's experience is different. So these are just commonalities that have been recognized. Many people who are grieving report feeling numb, experience reduced concentration, have changes in their eating habits, changes in their sleeping patterns, and emotions that feel all over the place. Often, when we first receive news of our pet's terminal illness or that they have died, there's a kind of disbelief. It's not denial because you believe it's happened, and that's what's making it hard to accept. The feelings can be so overwhelming that sometimes tears don't come right away. This numbness can pass quickly, or it can last days or weeks or longer. There's no timetable. Sometimes you can find yourself in the kitchen and not know what brought you there, or someone's talking to you and you realize you haven't been listening. Your mind is somewhere else. You realize you've been thinking about your sorrow or can't stop thinking about your pet. This kind of preoccupation with your feelings and memories is also very normal in the days, weeks, or months after losing a pet. This kind of preoccupation can also lead to a roller coaster of emotions where 1 minute you're minding your own business, you're watching television, and the next thing you know, the toilet paper commercial with the kittens has you crying uncontrollably. This sort of thing can often make us feel as though we're losing our marbles. But I want you to know that this is a completely normal part of trying to live without the ones that you love. This roller coaster of emotions can be exhausting and can disrupt sleeping patterns as well as eating habits. And just like the acute pain of your loss, these things don't last forever. They will ebb and flow. Grief isn't just one thing. There are different forms of grief that can grab hold of us at different times and in different situations. We can experience disenfranchised grief, anticipatory grief, as well as complicated grief. I feel like the most common form of grief among pet guardians could be disenfranchised grief. This is when someone who is suffering a loss isn't granted the recognition, understanding, or compassion that what they have lost is significant. You may not get it from the individuals around you, and there's definitely very little space in our society and culture to mourn the loss of an animal. By a show of hands, how many of you have felt like no one understands what you're going through after you've lost a pet? I don't know, Barbara, can you see any hands? I can't see everybody. Yes. Yeah, so none of you are alone in this experience. And there are 3 spots in us that this grief can land, depending on what feels most vulnerable to us. You can feel hurt because the relationship to your pet isn't recognized. And this lies in comments such as it was only a hamster, as if you can't have feelings for a fluffy little rodent. Or you can feel bad that the depth of the loss isn't recognized. This can come from comments like, but you only had her for a little while. How can you be so attached? And the third possible tender point could be your pain not being acknowledged. This can show up when others stop asking you after a few days or a few weeks how you're doing, expecting that you should be over it by now. Sometimes it can feel like a double-edged sword experiencing the love of an animal. The amount of joy they bring is equal to the amount of pain we feel when we lose them. Many animals that we keep as pets have much shorter lifespans than us. Bunnies, rodents, and other small animals have lifespans of anywhere from 3 to 10 years. Dogs and cats generally live 10 to 15. If you're lucky, some can go to 20. That means as animal lovers, we can experience the loss of the greatest love several times over the course of our lives. Unfortunately, this doesn't necessarily mean that it gets easier with experience or that we get better at coping. In fact, what it can mean is that we're always in a state of what's called anticipatory grief. Anticipatory grief happens when we have the time to foresee the imminent loss, as in a terminal illness diagnosis, advanced age, or a need to rehome. Typically, what happens is we receive the dreaded news that our pet is ill, or we are ill and can no longer care for them, perhaps due to their age or our own financial constraints. Treatment isn't a viable option, so we have to start thinking about palliative care and or euthanasia. During this time, we know the end is coming and we can come to terms with the reality. This doesn't mean, however, that once the loss occurs, that our grief is any lighter. What I believe is unique to pet guardians is that whether we're aware of it or not, as soon as we get a new pet, the quiet process of anticipatory grief sets in. While we may not be thinking about it consciously, as we teach our dog to sit or try and find ways to keep the kitten off the curtains, somewhere we're aware that we won't have them forever. I wonder if any of you have experienced this. You have a friend who has a great dog, super friendly, really well behaved, just a joy to be around. And when you tell your friend, oh my God, you have such a great dog, they'll agree with you and then add, I'm going to be a complete basket case when she dies. So even though we're able to appreciate and enjoy the day-to-day life with them, somehow it's never far away that it's a time-limited offer. A little more complex is something called complicated grief. What makes this kind of grief a little more complicated are the circumstances under which the event occurs, such as witnessing the traumatic injury or death of your pet, as happens when you've witnessed them being hit by a car, or maybe attacked in the dog park, or abused by a partner. Not only do you have to cope with the loss of your pet, you're also left with the very difficult emotions of what you have witnessed. This is also very true for those who need to rehome their pets. Not only do you have to contend with the agony of having to give up your loved one, you also have to cope with whatever is going on for you that is making it impossible for you to be able to keep your pet in the first place. Sometimes grief can open up the door to past feelings of anguish that haven't been fully processed or dealt with, or it can bring them to another level. I've seen this a lot in the hospital where I've worked. Someone brings a cat into the emergency department who's been seizing and not quite themselves. After some diagnostics, they discover that the cat has a brain tumor and the surgery to remove it is complicated, very expensive, and has a poor prognosis. The owner elects to euthanize and is inconsolable. And in speaking with this owner, you discover that cat belonged to their child who had died not long ago. So this cat was the only link they had left to their child, and being faced with having to end their life brought up deep feelings of grief over their previous loss. Sometimes we know that this is happening, but sometimes we're also unaware of it. Sometimes symptoms of complicated grief can sometimes look like PTSD. Complicated grief, as the name implies, is deep and complex. And this here is not the space to really get into it today. I just wanted you all to understand that this is real. And if anyone is struggling with multiple losses or even has never experienced a loss of any kind before, it's really important to seek the help of a mental health professional. Now, as I've already mentioned, one of the hardest parts about losing a pet, besides having to say goodbye, is that some of the people in your life may not understand just how much your pet means to you. Some of the most hurtful things we hear after a pet dies is, don't worry, you can get another puppy. There's tons of dogs out there that need homes. Or don't be sad, it was only a bird. Or don't worry, at least they're not suffering anymore. When people say things like this, most often they're just trying to help. They don't mean to be hurtful, but really what ends up happening is that we do hurt, and this can sometimes inhibit us from feeling our grief as much as we need to. What's hurtful about these statements is that it downplays what your pet means to you, and as a result, it devalues the pain you're actually feeling. What ends up happening then is that part of you ends up feeling bad for feeling bad. This disconnect from those we rely on for support can make us feel alone and cause us to shut down how we feel. Imagine telling someone who has lost a child or a partner not to feel bad, that all they need to do is have another baby or find another partner. That feels absurd to say to someone, yet people say it to those of us who have lost pets all the time. When we don't feel understood or we fear we're going to be judged, often our impulse is to hide ourselves, either physically by not going out to spend time with people, or emotionally. We either stop reaching out to those who should be our support system, or what I think happens more often is that we just pretend we're fine. It's understandable to be sad for a day, 3 days, maybe a week after we've lost a pet, but a month, 6 months, that doesn't feel acceptable. We deny what we're feeling in part to avoid the judgment we fear, but also in part to avoid hearing the unhelpful advice from friends, and this leaves us feeling alone in our sorrow. So instead of going out to a movie with your friend, you just stay at home alone. Another problem with these comments is that they're trying to appeal to our intellect. We as a culture are taught to avoid difficult feelings, and by stating the obvious, like, don't feel bad, at least they're not suffering anymore. While it's factually correct, it doesn't address what's happening for us in our bodies. It doesn't address the broken heart that we all feel. Yes, our best friend is no longer suffering. That's a blessing, but they're gone. They're not with us anymore, but we're still here and we're suffering. We're heartbroken because we've lost a connection that is important to us. We're all designed to connect with others. As infants, we come into this world completely dependent on others for our survival. As we age, we learn to take care of our physical needs, but we never outgrow the need to be in connection with others. The bond between a human and their pet is on one hand very much like our human relationships, and on the other hand, completely unique. Similar to our human relationships, we seek connection with others for security. Am I okay? Am I loved? And for comfort, I'm not alone in this. Unlike some of our human relationships, pets offer the unconditional love and support that is sometimes difficult to find with our humans. With humans, gaining their trust and affection can be a lot of work, and putting yourself out there can require some vulnerability, which is not often easy. With animals, for the most part, their love seems to cost less and be more consistent and reliable. Animals seem to require very little in return for their love. One of the things we do when we get a new pet is to teach them what they need to know to be safe to fit into our world. This is safe to chew on, this is not. You can sleep here, do your business there, not here, sit, stay, how to walk on a leash, and then maybe teach them a few tricks for fun along the way. During this time, we're not only teaching them boundaries to keep them safe, we're bonding. They learn they can trust us, and they're going to get what they need in terms of food and water and protection, and we're learning about them. If they're stubborn or food motivated, too smart for their own good, or just plain lazy. This is very much like the bonding that goes on between a parent and a child in the very early years of life. Parents give children what they need to survive, and in turn, those children show us who they are. What animals bring to us is a sense of belonging and that sense of being needed, of being important to another being. And this can be incredibly meaningful. For people with depression, some days getting out of bed feels impossible, but you do it because your horse needs to be let out to pasture and their stalls need to get mucked. They can be a reason to get out of bed to get the exercise that is so important in improving our own mood. And no matter how supportive and understanding our spouse or friends may be, there's only so many times they're going to listen to the same rant about your job or a coworker. Animals, they're an unending source of non-judgmental support. They will look up at you and wag their tail or blink their eyes at you the first time you tell them about your crummy boss, and they'll be just as happy to hear your voice the 400th time. When you come home from a bad day at work or school, or from a fight with a family or friend, your pet is a constant, reliable source of messaging that even though it doesn't feel like it out there, here, you're loved. Here, there's nothing wrong with you. Our pets never tell us we're fat or stupid or need to make more money. They're happy to see us if our clothes don't match or if we just told someone off in the parking lot. They're part of our everyday lives, part of our routines. So when they go away, our whole lives change. We're constantly reminded of their absence. I don't have to fill 3 bowls with food anymore, just 2. Or I don't have to get up 30 minutes early anymore because there's no one to walk. Or like in my case, I have to set an alarm in the morning now because there's no cat poking me in my face to get up and feed them. Living as a part of a society comes with lots of rules and acceptable patterns of behavior, and grief is one of these areas. There are things in our society that are acceptable to grieve over: the loss of a family member, even a friend. Some even say that the worst kind of grief is that of losing a child. Yet the loss of a pet is something that we're not encouraged or have space to grieve over. Loss is devastating. If you've never experienced loss before and losing a pet is your first experience, it's really hard to trust that you'll get through the grief. Our hearts all need certain things to heal, and what those things are different for everyone. If this is your first time, maybe you need to lean on someone else's story to figure out what's right for you. For me, I have a photo wall in my home where the cutest pictures I have of them hang as a way to help keep them in my heart. In the beginning, it's so hard to look at them. Sometimes I cry when I see them. Sometimes I look away, but I eventually can look at them in the photo and remember the time the photo was taken, or remember the thing they did that made me laugh or drove me crazy. And at some point, I can smile and feel that love again, not in the same way as I did when they were alive, but I can feel so lucky that I've had that love in my life, and I can hold it in a very special place in my heart. And so for me, so far, getting to this point has led to a willingness to fall in love again. I know that when I start cruising the rescue sites online, I'm getting close to being able to love with abandon again, to open my heart to the next greatest pet that comes my way. For some of you, that may never happen. And having loved that big, giant love one time is enough. And that's okay too. Whatever feels like it fits for you is the right thing to do. And when those around you can't understand what you're going through, I hope that this experience here tonight provides you with at least some of the understanding that is crucial to self-compassion, because we all grew up in a world that downplays the importance of our relationships with animals. So we're all hard on ourselves for getting attached. And I hope that you all leave here today feeling like you're not alone, and that you better understand what's going on for you, and that this can help bring some gentleness to your own experience. And now we can make some space. How much time do we have, Barbara, for questions?
Yeah,
5
well,
minutes,
let's just
10
see
minutes?
what the questions, yeah.
Okay. So if anyone has any questions, you can just either put your hand up or you can type it in the chat. But if nobody has any questions, that's okay too.
Daddy?
Yes, hello, and thank you for good presentation. And I have a question. For example, for my hamster, I had a special, I had a place in my home for the cage and everything and the stuff she was playing with. So my question is, what is your idea if after I lost my hamster, if I change the decoration, I put a flower instead of the cage, and what do you think? Is it a good idea or not?
Yeah, as a way to memorialize her?
No, just I wanna, because that was the cage at the corner in my apartment. So at the first days, I couldn't touch the cage, but and the stuff for her. But
Yeah.
after a couple of days, I wanted to throw away the stuff, and then, but the empty place, that was very hard for me. And now my question is, what is your idea if I wanna, for example, put the flower or put a coach on there or a lamp on there? Don't know.
Yeah, well, I think if that spot in your house is a reminder of your hamster and that relationship that you used to have, yeah, definitely. If you feel like you want to put something beautiful there, so that when you look in that spot, that you don't just see an empty space, but you see something that's beautiful and brings you joy. I think that's a lovely idea.
Yeah, because I don't want to escape from that feeling. I want to accept it. So that's why I asked this question.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. Sometimes that line between denial and turning it into something else, it can be a thin line to walk, right? Because I hear you don't want to put something there to make you forget about her, but at the same time, that empty space is a source of pain, and it's a reminder of something really sad. So yeah, if there's something you know, something that you can put there where you can remember, you don't forget her, but that it's also a beautiful thing that you can look there and still feel joy
Okay,
is a lovely idea.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shadi.
Rob?
Yeah, hi. Maybe just in response to what Shadi just said, maybe I don't know if I'm equipped to offer a suggestion, but what's worked for me, because my cat's only been gone a month, so it's very fresh. And of course, there's places in my home that were his, his food tray spot, his litter box, all these things. And what I've found is working well for me is actually I just started painting. Like I never used to paint, but I've been painting, like learning how to paint the past month or so. And I've already painted several of my cat, and I find that it is helping me process the feelings very well in a very positive way because it's productive, right? You work on something, the end product is something that you can be proud of. And I think that what's working for me too is this. I like just like Shadi was mentioning how she doesn't want to let go, like she doesn't want to forget that pain. Me neither. I don't want to forget it either. But I don't want the old memories. I kind of want to feel like I'm creating new memories of my cat with things that remind me of him, but the things that are new that are taking those spaces that used to be his, and they're still his, but in a different way. So, like I said, it's been only a month for me, so I'm not presuming to say it will work for everybody the same way and if it'll still have the same effect years and years from now. But I feel that it will. I feel that it is one of the most positive ways that I feel I could process the pain I'm going through. And, yeah, so I think those locations in your home are kind of like trigger spots in a way. So yeah, like I like the fact that I can look at something that I'm proud of that reminds me of my cat rather than just, dark memories. So, like I have a painting that hangs in my main floor. Usually when I would go down in the morning, he would be there. Like he'd always be there first thing I would see. So instead of him being there, it's a painting of his and I say good morning every day. So.
I love that. That's so wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing with us. That's really beautiful. And putting your sorrow into a creative outlet is so healing, and it does bring you a new way to be with your cat, right? In the painting, he's gone, but it helps you kind of build a different kind of relationship.
In the chat box, Mackenzie wrote, I'm having a difficult time thinking about the judgment that others may have of how I managed my pet's illness. I work in the pet care industry, and I keep torturing myself with how people may think of me and my decisions. Any insight or advice?
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, Mackenzie. And yes, other people's opinions of your choices can be really very difficult. And yeah, those are really hard to manage. And, I know you did the best that you could for your pet, right? And people that don't walk in your shoes, that don't experience what you had to experience, who don't have the responsibilities that you had with your pet, they can always judge based on, things they don't know. But your experience of having a sick animal, you were the one that had to live that every day, right? And you did the absolute best that you could. And that's so important. And that love that you had for your pet, that you made the right decisions, that, hopefully that can kind of carry you through those difficult moments. Because yeah, people always have opinions on stuff that they don't really know about, right? Like it was very unique to have an experience with a pet that you love that is ill. And again, I just want to say you always do the best that you can do with the information you have, with the resources that you have. And sometimes you have to make hard decisions. And those can kind of stay with you sometime.
I don't see any more questions right now. Do you want to move into the journaling piece?
Sure. So, yeah, like Barbara said at the beginning, get a pen and paper. So that is the time for that now. We have like a handful of questions that you could reflect on in your journaling. You don't have to answer all of them. You can just, answer one or two, or whatever, however many you have that you can fit into the 10 minutes that we give for the journaling. And then after that, we're going to go into breakout rooms where you'll have an opportunity to share with the people in your breakout room some of the things that you journaled about. Okay, so I'll read them out loud, but also Barbara is going to put them in the chat, I think.
Yep.
All right, so the first reflection is to just reflect on the pets that you've lost in your life and how their life with you has impacted you. What did they bring you? What did you get from your relationship with them? And the second one is, what is it from your relationship with your pet that you miss the most? And the third one is, how were you received in your grief about your pet loss? How did you respond? And how do you wish it would have been different? And then the fourth one is, where do you find hopefulness in your grief process? So yeah, just quietly take 10 minutes or so to think about those questions, write down your thoughts, anything that comes up for you, and then we'll put you into some breakout groups.